book on Danny Elfman, not his bios, which apparently he handles. But
that's an in-joke that he's referring to. I've always lied my way to many bios over many years.
This is why people believe he's from Texas. Which is not true. Where are you from originally?
I was born in Los Angeles.
Los Angeles, yeah. See? So we're going to talk about Dark Shadows, and do we have any Dark Shadows fans here? You've done The Wolfman, you haven't done a huge number.
I haven't really done any horror films. I mean, Wolfman, I scored it as a romance. It was really, the score was a very romantic score. As is Dark Shadows is more of a dark romance, and they're both actually related on many levels. Tragic romance is what those scores, the melodies of those scores are about tragic, doomed characters. And so neither one is really a horror film. You know, there's a bit of horror in Wolfman, and you know, there's some action stuff there was, but you know, what I loved about doing it was doomed romance is what I love writing for. Doomed characters they're fun.
How about Nightbreed? Would you say, is there any film you scored that you'd say was a straight horror film?
I guess Nightbreed would probably be the closest, but I just haven't gotten the opportunity, and most horror films out there don't require much score. You know, you're really doing a lot of tension. And probably the two things that are the most boring for me as a composer is, well, the one genre that I simply can't do at all is romantic comedy. I just don't know what to do with them. I did a few early on in my career, and it almost made me suicidal. Because if it's contemporary characters in a modern romance, I just have no idea what music would possibly or could possibly play for them. There's nothing that I have in my repertoire that relates to that. But the other, oddly, is horror, because most horror films just wants long, suspenseful chords, and you know, those are the things you can write in your sleep. It's really, really easy to write a long cue, building with dissonant strings, leading up to the big shock scare sound that's going to end it. So if that's what it is, I mean, it might be fun to watch, but it's not something I'm like crazy about wanting to do, because it's boring. Now, obviously there's been good horror films, and you know, some that I look at that I would love to do. You know, if Guillermo del Toro ever calls me, you know, on a real horror film that he's doing, of course I would say yes in a quick second, because it would be like really interesting. It would probably have a great score. But as a genre, it's not one that I like go after for that reason, because so many of the scores for so many horror films are so interchangeable.
Work for a long-lasting working relationship like this?
Well, we grew up on the same movies, for sure. I mean, we were both movie nerd kids, and saw all the same horror films. So when we met, and you know, I learned that Vincent Price was his idol, and Peter Lorre was mine, and that kind of defined our relationship for the next 26 years, because as you know, Vincent Price was always the sadistic master, and Peter Lorre was always the tortured one. And that kind of defines us for a quarter century now.
Yeah, I think that's something you know, people would probably assume, well, they worked together for 25 years, they must agree on everything, and it's awesome and an easy thing to go to work with it. But you guys actually disagree about things, and it's
not disagreeing. Sometimes it can be torturous trying to figure out, to help him find the journey of what kind of music will work for him in his film. So it's not about arguing or disagreeing over a piece of music, because we've actually never done that. But finding it can be really torturous sometimes, because start out with his movies, it's just not obvious what to play. A lot of experimenting, and he doesn't often know how he feels about it until I'm into the process and really working on the music, and then he begins to develop his own sense of what he needs the music to do. So sometimes it's easier than others.
So what was the toughest with him to do?
Well, I mean, like Big Fish was surprisingly tough. You know, I did a lot of music trying to find what the heart of that, musically, the heart of that one was. Dark Shadows was really difficult. Alice in Wonderland was tough, surprisingly. And
So you just never know. Movie to movie, I never know what to expect. Sometimes they're just really easy. Edward Scissorhands, was just real easy. The first thing I thought of. And same with Mars Attacks. I actually heard the whole theme in my head while I was watching a rough cut of the film, but just an animatic of the opening titles.
The Black Duck and the
animatic would just be like a really crude 2D rendering of the way it's going to look in the future. But all I needed to see was that, and I had to have them stop the screening. And I went out with the tape recorder and made a bunch of notes really, really quickly because I had the whole thing in my head. I didn't want to forget it. So that was about the easiest. And I would say Big Fish was probably the hardest.
Crowds. Is there something? At what point did you start thinking that film scoring would be something you'd be interested in doing? And how do you sort of transition away from being a rock star? I would think, like most people, that would be a dream job. They would want to have thousands of fans screaming at them as opposed to being in the room writing music.
Well, I never thought about it. I mean, being in a rock band was already my second career. I was in a theater group for 8 years. And that was my life. And then, so suddenly I was in a rock band, and then I hadn't thought about scoring a film until Tim Burton asked me to score Pee-wee. I'm doing like a real score. I'd done with the Mystic Knights, the predecessor to Oingo Boingo. There were 12 of us, and we did the score for my brother's film Forbidden Zone. And so it's just weird how one thing leads to another, because Paul Rubens was a big fan. That's Pee Wee Herman, by the way. He's a big fan of Forbidden Zone. And Tim used to come see the band, Oingo Boingo. So my name came up on their list, but for 2 different reasons. And so when they called me in to meet on Pee-wee's Big Adventure, I assumed they wanted songs. I just figured that's why you call someone like me is to write songs. And he said he wanted a score. And I really did ask him outright. I said, why me? And he showed me the movie, and I went and I wrote a demo. I did a piece of music on an 8-track tape player and played all the parts and sent a cassette tape. Didn't think twice about it. I figured I'd never hear from them again. And I got a call about 2 weeks later, and I'd been hired. And I seriously, for a night, considered not taking the job. And I actually told my manager at that time, I said, tell him I can't do it. And he said, why? He says, I don't want to fuck up their movie. I don't know how to score a film. And he said, I've been working on this for 2 weeks. You call him and tell him. Here's the number. And I really thought about it, and I thought about it, and then I think I just didn't have the nerve to make the phone call, which is how I became a film composer.
So what is it about writing for film that's more fun to you than being in a rock band?
It's not more fun. Who said it's fun? What's your favorite part about writing for film? Thinking about it before I start and when it's all done. Everything in between is not fun.
It's not.
It's really hard work.
So what keeps you going? What drives you to do it?
Well, there's always the thought of the next score, and the one that will be like really interesting to be able to like get my teeth into. Because there are moments where I feel like I'm really deep in the work, and I think even though it's hard, I really enjoy that. And they're not all like that, but I'm always like looking for something that'll let me get my teeth into it. But it's not about fun. I mean, I didn't choose even to be a performer. It just kind of happened. And I didn't choose to be a composer. It just kind of happened. But I figured after doing 2 or 3 films that I was starting to really get the hang of it. And I felt like I could do it. And then by the time I got to my 5th film, which was Beetlejuice, it's like, well, that was really fun now. Because, Pee-wee was really, I had a good time doing it. It was interesting. And then the next 4 were just kind of rough going. And then Beetlejuice, and it's like, I had a great time. That was really interesting. I got to really do some stuff. And then the next 4 were a little more difficult, but starting to get more interesting now. Because in the beginning, when I did Pee-wee's Big Adventure, they only offered me comedies, wacky comedies. There was no quirky comedy made in Hollywood that didn't come by me. And like I said, I didn't really know what to do sometimes. So I thought, this is going to be limited. But each Burton film opened up more doors. So Beetlejuice, now I'm offered fantasy films. So okay, that's getting more interesting now. And then my 10th film was Batman, and Tim asked me, he said, how could, you're doing like 4 films between each of my films. Like, what's going on? And I said, well, that's the only reason, that's how I'm learning how to do this stuff, so I can do your next film. You know, so I couldn't have done Beetlejuice if I hadn't done 4 in between, and I couldn't have done Batman if I hadn't done 4 again in between. I barely pulled that one off. And didn't quite make Edward Scissorhands' number 15. It was number 14, but it was more or less averaging every 5th film was Tim's, and I was learning as much as I could in between.
You took